Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, lecturers, members of the Research Consortium in the Prosperous Project, students and listeners. It is my great pleasure to welcome you at WSB University, one of the most international higher education institutions in Poland. We are an academic community that is passionate about our mission in education and science, with an openness to cooperation in an international environment and a focus on excellence in what we do. The quality of education at WSB University is acknowledged to be high position in the rankings of Polish higher education institutions and the Polish Accreditations Committee, but also international accreditation bodies like CIMEN, IQA accreditation. Apart from scientific life, the students of the university have the unique opportunity to develop their talents and discover new interests by getting involved in one of the several students' activity groups, international student associations, academic sport club, as well as take part in numerous initiatives that are held every year at the university. Importantly, we contribute to solving important and topical contemporary social problems. Today's conference is dedicated to important issue of interreligious and intercultural dialogue in the fight against religiously motivated violence, radicalism, and racism. Welcome to International Conference, Challenges and Perspectives, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Interfaith Dialogue, hosted by Professor Adrian Siadkowski and Dr. Karol Kujawa. This conference is part of an international project, Prosperous, protection system of large gatherings of people in religious sites under the European Union Internal Security Fund policy. WSB University is honored to be part of the international consortium, which, like the project, will be presented in detail by representatives of research consortium. Thank you for accepting the invitation to come into our virtual studio and listen to our special guest speakers. Karol, can't you introduce our special guests?
Thank you, Adrian. On behalf of our university, we are more than happy to host, at least online, our speakers from different parts of the world. And let me provide the basic information about our speakers. So the first is from UK, Elizabeth Drayson. She's representing University of Cambridge. The second one is from Israel, Ruth Bar-Sinai, and she will speak on behalf of David Yellin Academic College of Education in Jerusalem. The next one is from Germany, Fabian Brüder, and he will represent the Continental Reformed Church in Germany. The next one speaker will speak on behalf of University of Warsaw. It will be Agata Nalborczyk, and finally we will have representatives of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Hikmet Karčić, University of Sarajevo.
Thank you, Karol. Thank you for introducing our special guests from many countries. So we welcome our first speaker to our studio. Hello, Dr. Rafał Batkowski, representing the consortium leader, University of Łódź in Poland. Welcome, Dr. Batkowski.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me here. This is a privilege for me to deliver this short speech during this conference. On behalf of University of Łódź, I'd like to welcome you very warmly. And I will inform you very briefly about the Prosperous project. This is quite huge and highly important project from my perspective. Our mission is to enhance the protection of places of worship against terrorist threats by balancing security measures and preserving the open nature of religious sites, as well as standardization of resilience, protection, and crisis management. Our vision is to have in the future churches, synagogues, mosques, and other places of worship well secured and friendly for worshippers. Standardized safety and security infrastructure, procedures, professional personnel, and prepared community. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So the next one, because about mission and vision, I said something. Okay, thank you. We have developed the strategy for effective project management, but we have to bear in mind how we would implement the results of the project, our future results, of course. And what is highly important, what strategy of strengthening of places of worship we can propose or we can predict. This is crucial from my point of view. And of course, we are in line in many regulation in European Union. I'd like to say something during my presentation about this issue. Please, next slide. Let's have a look at these charts and numbers. I'd like to emphasize the role of individuals acting alone. This is still main threat when we are talking about terror in European Union. Let's move on to the next slide, please. As the University of Łódź, we have excellent partners to conduct the project. I'd like to express my deepest respect concerning these institutions and their contribution to the work packages and activities. Also, many thanks are addressed to the EU Commission and DG Home. Our area of research is mainly connected with the territory of the European Union and experiences, best practices, case studies of member states. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Objectives of the project encompasses main issues regarding strengthening resilience of religious sites, mitigation of threats, and protection of the community. Additionally, we have to remember about strategies related to counterterrorism, countering violent extremism, and preventing violent extremism. Next slide, please. We addressed our activities to various religious organizations, institutions, law enforcement agencies at EU and member state level, as well as local bodies and communities. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to present very briefly the structure of the project, work packages, which consist of many highly important professional and quite complex activities. So we've got, for example, vulnerability assessment workshops. We have documents, we have some questionnaire, and we'd like to propose our participant to be able to predict situation, threats, and risk, and propose some good activities against this kind of threats. Additionally, I'd like to emphasize a kind of activities which is connected with different member states. For example, investigation of additional case studies, religious sites needs analysis, preparing the tailor-made security measures for religious sites, preparedness for CBRN protection, preparation of training programs, and validation of protection systems. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Our project is in line with EU acquis. Security security policy and regulations. Among others, I'd like to emphasize, for example, the EU Security Union Strategy, EU Counterterrorism Agenda, and Directive on Combating Terrorism. We will be in line with, especially in line with security ecosystem, and we will try to develop our proposal connected with this issue. The next slide, please. Dear colleagues, now you can see actions based on the EU counterterrorism agenda. We support this approach, this vision, especially when we are talking about prevention and protection. This is quite important issues. Thank you very much for your time, dear colleagues. On behalf of the University of Łódź, I'd like to wish you success and personal satisfaction regarding our cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rafał Batkowski. I would like to thank you for presenting the research consortium and the prosperous project objectives. Our next speaker is Pablo Trojley, representing ISEM Institute from Slovakia, the leader of the work package responsible for coordinating and preparing the strategy of the anti-racism campaign. Welcome, Mr. Trojley. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adrian. So, my name is Pablo Trojley, and I'm the project officer of International Security and Emergency Management Institute. And it is also my great pleasure and honor to present you the highlighted facts about the planned and already proceeded steps of the Working Panel 7, which is the awareness raising campaign. Please, next slide. Firstly, let me introduce ISEM Institute. We are a non-profit organization providing publicly beneficial services, and the Institute is registered within the Ministry of Interior of Slovak Republic. As well, we have the well-settled cooperation with the NATO EOD COE, and our cooperation is on the way also with our MOD. So we are the professional platform of former or active police and national security officers, military, civilian protection, and crisis management experts. You can see our portfolio, our expertise on the bottom of the slide. So we actually concentrate a little bit more on the projects that are there. Thank you very much. And next slide. Well, there is a lost day without the doctrine, as we used to say, and definitely one without the strategy. So therefore, we developed the strategy of the security awareness raising campaign about the prevention, protection, deterrence, and response to various types of terroristic threats and incidents that may occur in religious places, including attacks with chemical, biological, and nuclear agents. I will introduce you a little bit more about the objectives, target groups, tools, and products, campaign message, and certainly I will introduce our plans as well. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So, striving to strengthen the security of religious sites, the following objectives of awareness-raising campaign were defined. More or less, just a little bit shorten the time, I will tell you that our objective is to increase the awareness of the stakeholders of related threats by preparation of special materials and events. Also, improving the knowledge of awareness in relation to terrorism threats, radicalism, violence, and violent extremism, with focus on religious sites, public places with high concentration of people. Of course, by promotions of project outputs, one of the main reasons is enhancing a dialogue between the religious sites, operators, security units, management, local and governmental authorities, and the communities in accordance with the activities that we planned. And of course, the last one, accelerate common interests to support security and religious sites, public places. Next slide, please. Target groups. Target groups are clearly divided into the three of them. So we will focus to religious sites, personnel, and leaders. Then the second one are the officers of public services and local authorities. And the third one, congregation worshippers and society in general. Of course, for every one of them, we are going to develop different facts that will go through the paradigm need to know. Next slide, please. Our campaign message, the concentration should be to better education, and then it follows the objectives of the whole campaign. So therefore, we are a little bit shorten the campaign motto, like to better to know, and then it concludes everything what we want to say about the project. Next slide, please. So as you can see, so we went through the tools and the products of the security raising awareness campaign. So you can see we are going to develop the brochures and leaflets, posters, newsletters, presentation, articles, videos, and e-learning platform. As I said, we went through the objectives and just wanted to really develop, for the particular group, the particular tool. So as you can see on the right hand side, the groups, the audience, need to know how to report any potential relevant information of concern, how to promote the understanding in community, which is not the case for all of the groups, how to identify the indicators of terrorism, and so on. So let's introduce a little bit more about the logic, how we proceeded. On the next slide, please. So as you can see, we developed not the 3, but the 4 groups in this way. So we divided the managers of the religious sites and the staff of the religious sites, because there is a different content that they need to know. And then we developed content, as you can see, just a little bit, go through to see, a little bit the analysis of the content of the awareness raising campaign tools. Next slide, please. Brochures and leaflets development example. So one of the key message is, the strategy is to put it in the way hide, run, and tell. So we will develop the brochures, excuse me, I have double voice. So, okay. So we will provide the brochures that will be dedicated for how the people should react in the terroristic attack, and how the people should react in the attack with the CBRN agency, of course, and how to report it. Next slide, please. This is the plan. Oh, previous, please. Previous. Not next, previous. Thank you very much. Okay, as you can see, the project is going to be for the 2 years. And now with the we are in the 8th month of the project when we are going to have having the conference. So the planned activities, we used a little bit more the operational planning, what actually depends on what. And as you can see, within the Warning Package 7, there are well settled and well planned activities. So we are starting with the development of the strategy, then the conference, and then we will go through the set of the brochures, presentations, and leaflets and posters. Of course, there will be, thanks to the AVSB, the planned activities with the students that will go through the panels, and will conclude everything with the final conference by the month of 24, by the 5th of May 2023. Okay, that's everything what I wish to tell you about the awareness-raising campaign of our project. So, and it was my pleasure to present it. So thank you very much, and that's everything from my side. So, word back to the studio.
Thank you, Paweł. Thank you, Paweł, for presenting an awareness-raising strategy of which education is an important area. As you said, the motto of our campaign is better to know. Better education is better prevention, protection, deterrence, and response to various types of terrorist threats and incidents. So let us now move on to our invited guests.
Thank you, Adrian. So we are going actually to start our lectures today with our key speakers. And the first speakers will be from UK, Elizabeth Drayson. And she will speak on behalf of Cambridge, of University of Cambridge. And before Elizabeth, you will start, let me provide a short information about you to our guests. So Elizabeth Drayson specializes in cultural history and also about relationship between Arabs, Jewish people, and Christians, especially in Spain. And she referred many times in her publication to the past, to the history of this relation. And moreover, her book, she published several books, and one of the most important is the book about this particular issue, about the history of the city of Granada. And moreover, she's a well-known scientist, and she focused on Islam in Spain and in Europe. So, dear Elizabeth, you're welcome.
Welcome, Dr. Drayson. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Adrian and my colleague Karol, for the introduction and for inviting me to speak today. So my topic then, my topic then is the power of the book, how Muslims, Jews and Christians work together in medieval Toledo. So the accusations of Islamophobia in the British government in the news this week underline the importance and urgency of the topic of interfaith dialogue and understanding. And my paper today addresses that topic by considering the power of the book of learning to overcome racial and religious prejudices. It focuses on instances of intellectual and musical collaboration between Muslims, Jews, and Christians in Spanish society in the 12th and 13th centuries. Such alliances were even more remarkable because at that time, Spain was a place of war, of religious and racial tension, as Christian armies pushed southwards to reconquer territory that had been under Muslim rule for over 500 years, since the Arab and Berber conquest of Spain in 711 AD. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that coexistence of hostility and harmony is epitomized in an illustration from a manuscript book on chess, dice, and board games, commissioned by the learned king Alfonso X of Castile, and completed in his scriptorium in the year 1283. The image portrays a Muslim tent, inside which two men are playing chess. The man on the right is a Muslim, the one on the left a Christian. And there are hints of conflict in the miniature. The Muslim is wearing his sword, but most importantly, chess is one of the oldest war games to represent war. It has been played in Spain longer than anywhere else in Europe, by Spanish Muslims since their arrival in the 8th century, and by Spanish Christians and Jews since the early 10th century. Modelled on Alexander the Great's squadrons, who were aligned in ranks of 64 squares, the number of squares on a chessboard, the game spread to the rest of Europe from Islamic Spain, and the pieces changed to reflect the feudal social environment of the rest of medieval Europe. When this miniature was painted in the late 13th century, chess was already popular, but King Alfonso's book was the first in Europe on the subject. So the game taking place suggests the ongoing conflict between Christian and Muslim. Excuse me. But what is striking is that it also shows an alliance between two men, possibly friends, possibly two rulers, who've come together in peace to play a board game. It conveys respect and understanding, a depiction of benevolent coexistence that reflects the cultural dialogue that held sway in 13th century Toledo at the court of King Alfonso X. When Muslim Toledo was first captured in the year 1085 by the Christian king Alfonso VI of Castile and Leon, it gave Christian scholars access for the first time to the treasures of Arab learning. By the 12th century, Toledo had become a hub for scholarship, a place where communities of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian scholars worked together, mainly on the translation of the Arabic science, philosophy, and literature, whose fame had already spread to the rest of Europe. There they worked together on translations from Arabic into Latin, often by way of Hebrew or the Romance vernacular of medieval Spain. Next slide, please. The Italian polymath Gerard of Cremona translated over 70 books from Arabic into Latin in Toledo, books that spanned philosophy and science, including medicine and astronomy, and, importantly, a version of Euclid's famous mathematical treatise, The Elements, which you can see there's an Arab manuscript, an early manuscript of The Elements in this picture. And this treatise was so significant that it was still used as a school textbook up to 1960 in Great Britain, which is quite a thought. The translation work was carried out under the patronage of a man called Raymond, the Archbishop of Toledo, and Gerard worked closely with Arabs and Jews and obtained many of his manuscripts from the library of the Muslim Banu Hud family, who had ruled Zaragoza in the 11th century. Then, 100 years later, from 1252 to 1284, the learned king, Alfonso X, presided over a school of Muslim, Christian, and Jewish intellectuals who also translated important Arabic and Hebrew manuscripts, this time not into Latin, but into vernacular Spanish. Alfonso also oversaw the compilation of vast histories of Spain and of the world, and he commissioned a variety of works, including the legal decrees set out in the Siete Partidas, or Laws in 7 parts, as well as the book of chess, dice, and board games with which we began. His court shone as a beacon of learning and cross-cultural cooperation. And what I think is intensely interesting in terms of the interfaith dialogue, which is the subject of this conference, is the discrepancy between the official view and the formal treatment of Muslims and Jews during Alfonso X's reign, and the everyday reality of scholarly life at that time. We can find the official view expressed in Alfonso's History of Spain, which was called the Historia de España, which recounts what he saw as the politically correct version of Spanish history, whose aim was to emphasize the ascendancy of Christianity over Islam and reinforce the Castilian Catholic political and religious worldview. Next slide, please. So here, I think this slide is an illustration of that idea of the ascendancy of Christianity over Islam. Here we can see a Muslim man being converted to Christianity. That's also from a manuscript from one of Alfonso's books. So the Historia de España's portrayal of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad is often very antagonistic. It expresses the belief that Muhammad was a trickster and a magician who'd come to uproot the established order, that the Quran was blasphemous, and that Islam heralded the coming of the devil. So these views reveal an intolerance and fear that evoke the ancient antipathy that sprang from the quills of early Christian chroniclers, people like John of Damascus and the Venerable Bede in England in the 8th century. Bede believed that Muslims allegedly were descended from Hagar, who was Abraham's concubine, while Christians came from Abraham's lawful son Isaac. And so this is his story of origins that rendered all Muslims illegitimate, while only Christians belonged to the legitimate bloodline. In terms of that official political stance and religious stance, the Jews of Alfonso's kingdom fared no better. In the king's great legal treatise, the Siete Partidas, the last part deals with criminal law and its penalties. Laws relating to Jews show no objectivity or tolerance and are befuddled by illogical prejudice. We read that any Jew who prevents another Jew from converting to Christianity incurs the death penalty, while a Christian who converts to Judaism loses both his life and his property. Sexual relations between a Jewish man and a Christian woman were also punished by death. Yet while such draconian measures must have fostered fear and suspicion in society at large, the everyday reality of the scholarly workshops patronized by the king tell us a quite different story. Schools of Arabic flourished, not just in Toledo, but in the whole kingdom, where translators typically worked in teams, with a Jewish or a Muslim scholar checking the Arabic text, which was then translated into vernacular Spanish by a Christian. Alfonso even established an academy of learning open to Muslims, Jews, and Christians in Seville, directed by the Arab physician Abu Bakr al-Rakuti. This kind of intellectual collaboration built on that similar, earlier cooperation between the 12th century scholars under Archbishop Raymond's patronage, where translators also often worked in pairs, like Gerard of Cremona, who worked with the Mozarab Galeb, who translated Arabic texts into vernacular Spanish, which Gerard then translated into Latin. And I think there was an exchange of learning there, which has certain parallels in the present, even with this very conference, where scholars across Europe have come together to exchange ideas. While my focus today is on the power of books and learning, my attention is also drawn to another kind of cultural collaboration at the medieval court of King Alfonso X, which has echoes in the 21st century. Could I have the next slide, please? In two other images from the manuscript of King Alfonso X's songs to the Virgin Mary, Cantigas de Santa Maria, we can see firstly, and this is the left image here, a Muslim and a Christian playing stringed instruments and singing together. Next slide, please. In the second image, and here we're looking at the one on the right, a Christian and a Jew are playing music sitting side by side. So these joint musical performances, I think, also have resonance in our own world, not just because musicians of today play certain instruments like the guitar and the violin, whose precursors were the Arabic oud and rebec. The collaborative music making of the Alphonsine court was, I think, a modest forerunner of the wonderful contemporary West Eastern Divan Orchestra, based in Seville and founded by Daniel Barenboim and Edward Said to bring together musicians from the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish countries of the Middle East and Spain, with the aim of promoting understanding between nations. So, two key aspects emerge from this snapshot of multicultural exchange in medieval Spain. Firstly, that scholars were brought together through the power of books and learning in the common pursuit of knowledge, an endeavour that rose above hostility and hatred and above the official political and religious dictates of the time, as did the joint performance of music. Through the collaboration and understanding between scholars of the three faiths, medieval Toledo formed the bridge between Greco-Arabic scholarship and Northern Europe, leaving a lasting legacy of enlightenment that changed the evolution of European culture. Second, and above all, their mutual respect vouchsafes another side to the conflicted relationship between Muslims, Jews, and Christians of Europe, one which I think has often been overlooked or hidden, unappreciated, or perhaps simply unknown. It's a relationship that relies upon friendship and cooperation, tolerance and exchange, that reveals the immeasurable debt Europe today owes to Islamic and Jewish culture, and which may, I hope, foster greater mutual understanding and new kinds of interfaith relationships. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Elizabeth, for your excellent presentation. And if you don't mind, we will be more than happy if you will allow us to use your presentation for our students at our university. So meanwhile, I would like to ask you some questions related to your lecture. And I would like to ask you, because you present history and it was what's happened in the past. So we have questions what is going now. So what is the current relations between these groups in Spain? So can you provide us information about this particular problem?
Yes, thanks, Karol. Yes, that's a very good question. I've got a few notes. A few things occurred to me here. I think if we think first of relations between with Jews in Spain at the moment, and I think there are the Jewish population of Spain is quite small. There are only, I think, a maximum of about 50,000 Jewish people living in Spain at the moment. But in recent years, one very, very positive thing happened. In 2015, the Spanish government issued a new law that conferred Spanish nationality on all Sephardic Jews, who were Jews originally who had been exiled from Spain in 1492. So this law confers a Spanish nationality on the successors of those families, and it was intended as a gesture of reconciliation, of course, and of a recognition of them belonging to their Spanish homeland. And you mentioned my book on Granada earlier. Thank you for doing that. And in Granada, it's interesting that Jewish heritage in the last 3 or 4 years has become really a focus. There are 2 Jewish heritage museums now, and tours as well with a guide, and they're making the city's Jewish heritage visible again. So I think these are really important steps. In terms of Muslims in Spain, again, there's an estimate of, I think, about 2.2 million Muslims living in Spain. So again, relatively small numbers. But the same reconciliation that was offered to the Jews in terms of their nationality hasn't been offered to the families of the Spanish Moriscos, who were the Muslim converts to Christianity who were forced to leave Spain, who were exiled from Spain in around the year 1609. And the fact that the government now hasn't offered that that same gesture to Spanish Moriscos has caused some disquiet in the Muslim community. But that being said, I think in the last 30 years, a lot's been done to revive the memory of Spain's multicultural past and to try and forge a narrative about democracy and about religious pluralism and the relevance of interfaith dialogue. So, you know, Spain has this kind of image, I think, of being a beacon of multicultural coexistence and interreligious dialogue. But one negative thing is that in recent years, it's been contested by the growth of right-wing political movements and parties such as Vox in Spain, who are advocating, promoting the idea of returning to a Catholic national identity for the country. So that, in a way, has rather undermined those efforts, which are still ongoing.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for your feedback. And I would like to ask you one more question because we have still time. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to learn something more about this issue. The next question is about some of the dialogue initiatives between these groups in Spain. Can you maybe give us some small information about this particular problem?
Yes, thanks, Karol. Yes, a couple of thoughts then. The Spanish government actually has been, I think, quite proactive in this area. And after the dreadful terrorist attacks in Spain, particularly in 2004, a lot of work was done to try and promote interfaith dialogue. And the government began what was called the Pluralism and Coexistence Foundation. This was a policy initiative that focused on coexistence and religious freedom and so on. And there are a number of other initiatives of that kind that have been developed in Spain since that time. And then I guess I have to say something more about Granada because it really is, I think, a focal point for a lot of people. It's a city of reference for the European Union. They held a meeting there not that long ago precisely to discuss issues of immigration and problems of interfaith hostility, precisely because Granada, is important for its historic multiculturalism and the universality of its links with other faiths. And I think that Granada, is a place of enormous possibility for good as people come to, if you like, honor its Arab dimension more. And a crucial thing is, in terms of initiatives, specific initiatives, that Granada, for those reasons, is going to bid for the award of being European Capital of Culture in 2031, which I think would be a very important thing if it was successful, because it would certainly help to foster cultural and religious understanding in Europe, I think.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your very interesting presentation. Spain is interesting sample influence of Islam, and connection with past and accurate currently situation and challenge to the future. Your books is very interesting. This is a travel to the past and the future and connection between these words. So thank you again, and
we can only add that we can recommend for our guests to buy this book and to read, and for sure we will use this for our students, your book. So thank you again for your presentation. Thank you indeed, and we will start the next presentation with our next guest from Israel, Ruth. Shalom, good to see you.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you too. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well, and welcome. And before you start, let me provide a small resume of about you for our guest. So Ruth is currently in Jerusalem, and she will speak on behalf of David Yellin Academic College of Education. And she's well-known person in not only in Israel but also in Europe. She has involved in building the dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians for many years. So it was a great challenge for her to implement this kind of initiative, dialogues between these groups. And also she used to work in the Academic College of Education, where actually Christians, Muslim and Jewish people learn together. So it is like a great initiative, and we can learn from her a lot how it's working. So she's promoting this dialogue, try to promote this dialogue among Israeli society to bring a peace in this country. So, dear Elizabeth, you are welcome, and we will be more happy to learn from you how it's working in Israel, the dialogue between these groups.
Welcome, shalom, and the floor is yours.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so as you look at those three ladies, you can see that they are, well, you can basically, it's an example for a conglomerate of identities. So if you look at this lady, she's from Nazareth, she's an Arab. That's how they identify themselves. It's important for me to say that it's not my labels, it's how they identify themselves. She is a Christian Arab from Nazareth. This one is a secular girl from Jerusalem, a Jew girl, but she would say she's Jewish, and she is a Muslim from a city in Jerusalem, in Israel, in the center of Israel, and she will call herself Palestinian. So it's really a conglomerate of identities, and it's very important for my talk. Please go on. Next slide. So we see studying at the college as a significant opportunity for meeting the other, whoever the other is, a partner who share for 4 years the same home. We hope they see the college as a home, and the profession. And it's important because many of the meetings between different cultures are for a short time, for either for a weekend, for even for a month. This is for 4 years. It's a long option for a meeting. And when I say the other can be among the Jews themselves, if you're secular, religious, etc. And they have the same profession, which is very important. Meeting the other is an opportunity to meet yourself. I'll talk about it a bit later. And these studies are preparation as member in the Israeli and in East Jerusalem, because most of our students nowadays come from East Jerusalem, multi-identity, multicultural society, and also preparation is for teachers in a multi-identity and multicultural classes. Next, please. So I will talk about the dialogue seminar first. I see that my photo is covering some of the slide, but it's okay. I started it in 2004, seminar for Palestinian and Jewish Israeli education students, not alone, but together with students from other countries. I started with Norway, the Netherlands, Northern Ireland, England, Belgium, and also Poland and Ukraine. Next, please. It's been 16 years, 350 students. Each group contains of 6 Palestinians and 6 Israeli Jews. 10 to 12 European, and the seminars take place in both countries. I will refer mostly to the seminars with Northern Ireland. So it's Belfast and Jerusalem, because they were the longest, and also the Protestant and Catholic conflict in a way has some similarities to the Palestinians and Israeli conflict. Next, please. So the essence of the dialogue, and now I'm going to enlighten it by Mordechai Rothenberg, who developed a Jewish psychology, which is a socio-psychological model based on Jewish sources. So in contraction to the dialectical approach to conflict based on I or thou, where only one party wins, Rothenberg and the Jewish psychology is a dialogical approach, I and thou, which means both parties coexist, even with tension between them. The dialogical approach is based on the Kabbalistic idea of contraction, in Hebrew it's tzimtzum, and there are different few aspects to this contraction. First of all is the interpersonal aspect, which means contraction makes room for others, giving a person and other space to coexist. Because if I don't contract myself and I have fully myself in the dialogue, I will never be able to listen to the other. The individual does not vanish or become erased, but continue to exist. Now, interpersonal contact require mutual contraction, because if it's only me, nothing will happen. The contraction of individual is cooperative with others, thus not taking up all the space. Next, please. Next slide. In contraction is on both cognitive and emotional level. It's not enough for me to decide that I'm contracting myself. I have to really feel that I'm doing it, fully do it. The other aspect is the intrapersonal aspect. Contraction inside oneself. A human being has many elements in himself, as I showed with those girls, or if I look at myself, I have many different elements in me, and contract one element, I have to contract one element or more in order to let another element expand and express itself. For example, if I'm a very rational person and I keep on being only rational and don't have emotional aspect in me, I will always stick to the facts and I will not be able to have empathy or sympathy to the other partner in the dialogue. While contracting myself, I can really listen to the other, to his story, and I am able to learn from it. I don't have to accept it, but to know it and respect it. Well, the big challenge is to contract yourself for someone who is very different than you, that contradict you. And this happens a lot in Palestinian and Israeli conflict. And this might be, in most cases, a painful process. The double mirror, what does it mean? And that's why what I said before, meeting the other is also meeting yourself. You see yourself in the other and also see how he sees you. And then you learn about yourself, your inner essence. And also when I contract myself, I decide which element to contract. What is really important for me to keep in the dialogue? What is the essence of me? And this is an exercise by itself. Now, everyone has his point of truth. When you understand that your truth is only partial, and you are able to see that the other point of truth exists, and the other one has a point of truth, then you can start the dialogue. Next, please. The past. Well, we all know that the past is such a big stone in any dialogue of conflictual situation. So in order to have a dialogue, you have to contract the parts of the past that control your thoughts in order to expand a place that will enable you to choose a change or a better future. There are many ways to interpret the story or a narrative. The contraction opens up opportunity for a dialogical coexistence between different interpretations. And in the Jewish way of thinking and analyzing text, interpretation are very, very strong and basis. Now, this gives not hermetic past, which is allow only a single fundamentalistic interpretation for the past, but hermeneutic past, allowing for a multitude of retroactive interpretation. And another important point is we all have imprinting. We were born in a certain place, to a certain society with a certain culture. That's something we can't change, but we can decide if and how to change its meaning. I was born in Jerusalem. I'm X generation in Jerusalem from my mother's side, first from my father's side, who came from Bialystok. This is what I have in me, but I can choose what do I do with it. It is everybody's right, and I believe also duty, to choose how to deal with his personal and group past. Not to erase the past. We don't talk about erasing the past. It's impossible anyway. But to recompose, this is the Rothenberg philosophy, psychology term, recompose your past into a new melody that will be able to give you a better future. Now, we all have ups and downs, and it means that we need actively rise up for a better future, not just sit and say, well, there is nothing I can do, that's the situation, I'm stuck in it. Next slide, please. Goodness and trust. In every human being, there is good. That's very basic in the Kabbalistic and the Jewish beliefs, and a desire to bring it to the world for a better reality. But this is not only in Judaism. It's in many cultures we find it, so it's more universal than culture, even if goodness means different things in different societies. The problem is when one aspect of the good grows to an absolute ideal and take over, then the evil is controlling. And we have many examples for certain ideals that take over by the name of goodness. Then, for this case, the contraction is tzimtzum. Contraction is a cure. Enlarge the variety of options to understand and not to hold to one absolute truth. Believing in the good is the basis for trust between people and also between nations. To have a dialogue with someone else is to trust him, to let him take the responsibility and sometimes to lead. Next, please. Next slide. So, to summarize in a way, what does it mean an active dialogue, which is a basic for the Jewish psychology? Be open to any idea, thought, story that comes up. Listen to all in a humble way. Do not get stuck only in facts. You don't have all the answers. Realize it. And then contract yourself and be open to other ideas, interpretations of the reality, and maybe to change your mind. There is also a universal dimension to contraction, which means that it's not only a dialogue between individuals, but also between nations. Contraction does not weaken, but strengthen, and a connection is created between the constructing parties, which is stronger, very much stronger than the strength of either party. Next slide, please. So now I go back to my model that I developed with other colleagues, a dialogue of multi-identities group. And this is a group, a photo of my student that I love very much because, first of all, you can't see who is who. You don't. Even if you try, you'll make mistakes, I'm sure. But it shows one of the most important things is create a common safe space. Without a common safe space, there can't be a dialogue. Next, please. So I'll go through the group rules in a way, which each group, every seminar has its own rules, but now I relate, and you'll see the connection to the Jewish psychology. There is no, and all the rules are more or less the same. There is no one truth, there are multi-narratives, giving space and legitimization to everyone's voice narrative, listening with respect to each narrative, not necessarily accepting it, relating to each participant's subjective experience. And now, especially with the social media, what happens in the group stays in the group. You don't go and tell everybody, this one said that, etc. Next, please. Framework and principles of the dialogue. Co-facilitating. You can see here Fatma, my colleague for many years, and the students. And here we are in Belfast, and when we have the dialogue with another group from Europe, we always also have more facilitators. So here we had Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, and Jew together as facilitators. Next, please. We have representative of major minorities. This is, for example, a photo from group in our group in Holland. You can see that there are many different minorities, and we try to include everybody. So even in Poland, we had group from Ukraine at certain times and group of Tatar, etc. Next, please. Next slide, please. So we have workshops, most of the dialogue based on workshops. Some assembly, but mostly small groups. So here we can see our two students, a Muslim and a Jew that are religious, with Protestant and Catholic, discussing very sensitive issues about the differences between the religions. And this is much easier to do it in a small group. Next, please. We do it outside of Israel, and many times I get this question, why do we have to go out of Israel? And this is very important to explain. Going out of Israel, especially with the tension we have here, is disconnecting our students from their usual life frame, which helps basically to contract, as I described before. It allows the participants to get away from their collective political, cultural identity, the multi-elements they have, far away from their family, friends, country, and the official flag that they are supposed to hoist. So for me, for example, being a mother to three, I was an officer in the Israeli army, etc. I have all other labels on me. When I have a dialogue here in Israel, people wait in a way that I will say A, B, and C. When I go out, I'm a free person. I can say whatever I want. And it pushes the students into self-analysis and self-clarification of the questions. Next, please. So this is, for example, an example. As I said, there is no fixed agenda, as in the active dialogue, open dialogue, which means that the agenda comes from what happens to the group, from the preparation phase till the end. So, for example, here we were in Belfast on May, which is the Jewish or Israeli, Independence Day, and the Palestinian Nakba. And our students, Palestinian and a Jew, were preparing together those two narratives that happened exactly at the same time, presenting it to the Protestant and Catholic Northern Ireland students. And this gave them an opportunity to talk about the two stories first for themselves, to learn about it. And this is also presenting a different picture than what we see in the media. In the media, we see mostly fighting between Palestinians and Israelis. Next, please. So the seminar members are their partners for discussing and clarifying conflictual issues. They give and get individual and group support, which is very important. Then we have the double mirror that I explained before, focusing only on the seminar and learning to live together as a group. And this is important. I'll show it in the next slide, please. Living together in different places and countries is a key. We studied in Israel in the preparation. And why is it important? If we look at this photo, don't read, just look at this photo, which looks like they were posing. There are three girls, an Arab Christian, a religious Jew, and a religious Muslim. They're all religious, found themselves in the preparation phase in Israel, Friday afternoon, almost now, praying in the room. And then they asked someone to take a photo, which looks like they were posing for us. But this was a really very spiritual and strong moment for them. Here we are sharing a room, simple room as you can see, praying together, a spiritual moment. And this enabled to see how similar we are and searching for the similarities in the differences and the differences in the similarities. To whom do you pray? Okay, they are all special education students, all women. One is married, the other one is not, etc. And then you can really understand more about breaking those circles and understanding and listening more to the other. Next, please. And another photo that I like, the daily shared group life strength and friendship, and invite a deep, daily and ongoing informal dialogue. Here, dancing together a debka in the evening, and the informal dialogue is not less important. It may be more important than the formal dialogue, because they go with an unsolved question back to the rooms, and they sometimes discuss it through the night, because they live together, because they share rooms, and they decide which rooms they're going to share. Most of the cases, it's Muslim or Christian, Palestinian, and a Jew. Next, please. Well, the dialogue context has two circles, personal and professional, sharing personal family narratives. dealing with stereotypes and prejudice that are very strong, and personal education vision. A lot of knowledge, because we are all lack of knowledge, history, culture of all major identities. So if we go to Belfast, we learn about the Protestant Catholic history and conflicts, etc. Lectures by historians, writers, activists, and culture experts. Also, and this is very important, learning about the discussion on multicultural and topics in other societies and countries. So if we talk about the history of Poland, about the many wars Poland went through, but we are not focusing on the Holocaust. It will come up there, but we are learning what happened, what is the history. And because we are in education, we visit educational institutes and do all kinds of activities with the children, but I will not go into this. Next, please. Another example, tours at cultural, religious, historical, significant places. Here we go to Belfast Wall, which still exists even though they have the peace agreement. And the Belfast, we meet people from both sides, from Protestant and Catholic. Each one is telling his own story. They call themselves terrorists, fighting for peace, talking about the wall now in Israel. So we relate to this issue of the wall by meeting or visiting those people, which also what they do now for a better society in Belfast or in Northern Ireland. Next, please. They're reflecting on the process during the seminar, and at the end, I will not go through all this, just say that they are sharing it with their family and peers and also with their college community. Next slide, please. So just a few examples. Most of the students talk about group empowerment, and I'm going to quote very quickly. I shared my experiences, happiness and sorrows with people who deeply supported me, gave me endless love, and made me understand that the change starts within each and in all of us. So as I said before, in the Jewish psychology, you're not staying where you are down low, you're trying to actively make a change and go up. Our reality is so different from the outside reality. I miss the group where I can talk freely about all the questions that I have touched for the first time in the dialogue, and this happens a lot. Next slide, please. Trust, as I mentioned before, is very basic for dialogue, and only when you contract yourself and trust the other, there is a dialogue. So they talk about trusting themselves and in the other. I love this photo because they became very good friends. And one of them said, it was them and us. Now we are more than best friends without stigmas and prejudice. And the girl at the left lost her father. The guy from the right was a Palestinian from Bet Zafafa, was the first one to come and comfort her and be with her. Next, please. They projecting their new insights to the family and peers. While talking to my friends and family, I have a new voice, more empathy and less aggression. The change around me is like the ripples caused by a thrown stone. I hope to enlarge these ripples, and this is very important for us. We don't want to stay only inside the college. We like the influence to go out. But, and here's the other quote, my friends do not always understand my new insights. Sometimes it's very difficult to go back to your own community. Well, you became a Jew lover, all of a sudden you have a Palestinian terrorist friend, people who didn't go through those process of the dialogue in the way they did, don't really understand it, but they keep on pushing and explaining, and I don't have enough time to quote the other stories, how they influenced their community. Next, please. Influencing as educators is very, very important because through the students, their pupils, they can influence, while bringing his own true inner world into his education. He influences and changes his pupils' reality. His pupils who are the future and the reality itself. In both sides, we need to create in our pupils a concept of openness and acceptance of the other. This way, we will change the reality. Next one, please. And I often have this question, can a dialogue between Palestinian, Jewish, Israeli education students change the reality? And I made a little research. I'm not going to go through it, just a few examples. Next, please. Only when you present to each side the other side, people must deal with this reality. The critical mass of people in dialogue will make the change, which means that for many years we do this dialogue, and yet we didn't solve our conflict. So people say, why do you do it so much? Well, I believe that we are building infrastructure, a base, and in many ways, this will maybe help to bring a change. And someone else said more dialogue in both nations and with the government support, and this is a big question, with the government and without the government support. Next one, please. So to summary, in the words of the Jewish psychology, now when we built the model, it was not based on the Jewish psychology, it was based on many other things, but now that I'm studying Jewish psychology, I see very clearly how it connects. So the reality is there, but there are many ways to interpret it. I don't have all the answers. I have to contract myself and be open to other ideas. My way is true, but only partial. There is also other people's truth. The change is how I look at my own truth and also to be able to live with it, sometimes in a very paradoxic situation. All students report some personal change. Most show the desire to project and enlarge the change to their families, peers, pupils, general public, and some became social and educational activists. Last one, please. So thank you for listening, and I'm sorry for the misconvenience that happened in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your excellent presentation and for your knowledge and experience which you are sharing with us. So thank you again for this. And meanwhile, we have some questions to you, and I think Adrian would like to ask you about this, about your presentation, about your topic.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth, because we do a lot of things similarly for the increase of dialogue. So we are the training in international environment in here. So in this area in Benjin, for example, left about 98% Jewish community. So this is a special area for us, and we very good understand what is the dialogue, what is the
If I may, Adrian, also in Dąbrowa Górnicza,
yes,
there was a very strong Jewish community, like 30%. So we used to live together like neighbors. Yes, so this area is especially very symbolic for us as well to promote this dialogue, because Benjin was, like you mentioned before, 98%. So
yes.
It was the shtetl, very important in this area, and Dąbrowa Górnicza as well. Yeah, so
we good understanding with the dialogue. So Ruth, I want to ask about the real power of dialogue, because you taught many about the social role and social approach to the dialogue. You live in area where the theme of our conference is focused like a lens. So where all the three great monotheistic religions cross each other. How is it that the social level we are often able to function in a religious or cultural diversity, but this approach changes when we enter into the roles. For example, the political level. This is not political issue, but this is the sample. And my question is it, in your opinion, of course, a matter of perception of truths through the prism of social role, and change this approach?
Can you ask again the last line again?
My question is, when we change the roles, for example, we live together with the Jews, with the Muslims as neighbors, and when we change social roles, like a politician, this approach for the neighbors is changed. And my question is, this change and change approach to the neighbor is social roles matter?
Well, I think there is a big difference between the political level and the I would say the neighbors level, because and I think it's true all over the world, and it's true by history that people live together. My father came from Bialystok, which was 70% Jewish at a certain time, and here in Jerusalem we live in some areas next to each other and also at the college. But when there is a conflict, and conflicts are happening, and the political level is jumping in, then it's very easy to burn those bridges that we built. Because if, as I said before, if the past is strong and you don't erase, not erase, forget or move or contract, that's the word, contract some of the past and go on and understand that you can't stick only to the past, then nothing is happening. But on the political level, people lean and use the past all the time. That's what they do, okay? And they want, for political power, most cases you don't join forces of the people, you split them, and I see it all over, and also in Israel. It's it's a divide and rule. This is very known sentence. It's not mine, and I think that by building those friendship is very important, because in some cases it doesn't work when people are ruling differently and want on the political issue, because there are friendship and there are strong activities. Even now, when in Israel, I can give an examples from Israel. Even now that our government decided not to deal with this conflict, I'm not going to go why, but we are saving our democracy. It's more important, and I respect it. There are all kinds of groups that are doing things for the Palestinians nowadays. So I'm sorry to say, but we need a lot of root work down there and not to give up. And also between Poland and Israel, Poland and Jewish. We know it. I work with many people in Poland now, and most of them think the same way I think about politics. We are not a minority. We are strong.
Yes.
Don't give up.
Yes, thank you very much, Ruth. This is a very important issue for current situation, not Israel but in Poland too. So, as you said,
I just want to say one sentence. I've been leading seminars for Polish and Israeli students. Some of them were Palestinian as well, but mostly Jewish, where our focus was living bridge, which means building new connections.
Yeah.
Not erasing the past. We can't erase the past, but what can we do from here? How can we go forward from here with these similarities that we have between the two countries? How can we build a bridge and better and learn from each other and be more powerful? As I said before, we are more powerful when we join forces.
Yes, Ruth. We must remember about the past was, but we have to go forward. Ruth, thank you again for your excellent presentation and excellent experience. Thank you.
And of course, on behalf of our university, we will try to involve in this kind of dialogue initiative. We already start to connect us with Israel. We will invite students from Israel to Poland, to our university. So we can promise you, Ruth, that we will go ahead with your ideas. So thank you again for your presentation. And now another speaker, very interesting person as well, will represent Germany, Fabian Brüder. Hello, Fabian. And now another speaker, very interesting person as well. Can you hear us? Will represent Germany, Fabian.
Yes, I can hear, but hear everything twice.
Okay, can you make a favor for us? Can you turn off click meeting so we can hear you?
Yes, I can hear, but
just click meeting.
The reason of double voice is your click meeting. Please turn off your click meeting.
Now it works.
Now it's fine. Okay.
Yes.
So before we will start, let me provide small resume about you. So Fabian is the pastor, and he's representing Evangelical Reformed congregation in Dresden. He used to study theology at the Humboldt University in Berlin and in many other places as well. He was a fellow in Tallinn, and also he took opportunity to get knowledge in this place about the Orthodox and Catholics Church. For many years, he has been involved in promoting the inter-religious dialogue, especially among the Christians. So we really appreciate your work, Fabian. And so he is organizing a lot of economical meetings and create international networks in Germany. So his presentation will be actually about his personal experience, how he is trying to involve so many initiatives and promote the dialogue. So, dear Fabian, you're welcome.
Welcome, Fabian. The floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you a lot for inviting me to this conference. I'm really, really grateful that I can share some of the experiences that I've made over the last couple of years. And I want to start by introducing myself in a second way. Because before I talk about the experiences that I made as a pastor, I think it is very crucial to understand my background. I grew up in a small town close to Hanover. And in this small town, there were some refugees from Bosnia and from Afghanistan and from different countries. And those people were people that I went to school with. So it was completely normal and everyday life for me in school to have Muslim friends. I also had a Jewish friend, and this interfaith experiences started quite early. And in the church in my hometown, there was a pastor who was not only very interested in interfaith dialogue, he was also very interested in building bridges between people of different faiths and different faith communities. So I think this is important to understand when it comes to the question why I am so interested in interfaith encounters. Next slide, please. I want to start by offering an interfaith reading of a Bible passage that I stumbled over a couple of days ago. It is a story from the Gospel of Matthew. And before I talk about this passage and offer an interfaith perspective on this passage, I just want to underline that there are so many texts in the Bible that are the product of interfaith encounters. So as a pastor who deals on an everyday basis with those biblical texts, I think it is very important to always keep in mind that many of those texts are the result of interfaith encounters. And so that to be a pastor also means to draw attention to the historical background of these texts, to the contexts of these texts. And I do this not only when I talk to youngsters, but also in different circles of the parishes that I've worked in, to really stress this interfaith context of many biblical texts. But first of all, I want to draw our attention to this text. Next slide, please. So, as you can see, I underlined some of the words, and the first word is centurion. So about this text, it talks about someone, a centurion, who is a Roman. He is a non-Jew. And this non-Jew is now coming to Jesus, a Jew. And the reason why he is coming to Jesus is because he realizes that there's a problem with one of his servants, and he, the centurion, is incapable of solving the problem with his servant. So he is discovering that although he is so powerful as a centurion, there's something that he is not capable of doing. He lacks the competence of healing his servant. So that is why this non-Jew is coming to Jesus the Jew. And the second three words that I underlined are came to him. So the centurion is reaching out. He is leaving the place where he is living to go out and to reach out to Jesus. And then I underlined the word Lord. And by saying Lord, he is showing respect. He is proactively sending signals of respect. And you will see it also in the second in the second passage. It says, Lord, I am not worthy. So the reason why the non-Jewish centurion is saying this is because he knows that back then many Jews would not go to a non-Jewish household and, for example, eat together. This would not have been imaginable. So he also respects that and sends proactively signals of respect. And then I underlined the words, but only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. So, interestingly, the centurion says there is a connection with what you say and what happens to me. There is a correlation of our existences. There is a theologian who recently died. His name is Desmond Tutu, and he stressed that the Christian idea of humanity, not only the Christian idea, basically the idea of humanity in the Genesis, is that we are all connected. There is a network of humanity in this world, and we can't separate and isolate our own identity, our own humanity from the identities and humanities of others. So this is another important part. And then, in the end, the Jew, Jesus, is saying, truly I tell you, in no one in Israel I have found such faith. He says this to his Jewish fellows. So, in the end of this story, a Jew is telling other Jews, have a look to this non-Jew, have a look at this face. This is what faith is about. So a Jew acknowledges the faith of a non-Jew. Some scholars would say that in this passage, the centurion is actually making a confession to Jesus and is not here as a representative of the Roman faith. But the story doesn't end with the centurion converting to Judaism. The story is not finishing by the centurion becoming a part of the movement of Jesus. So the centurion is portrayed as a person who sticks to his faith and is acknowledged in this faith. And there are some aspects in the story that are very important to me when it comes to interfaith encounters and the experiences that I have made. Next slide, please. So it all starts with a self-critical reflection. The important thing with the centurion is that he understands that although he is so mighty and so powerful, that there are things that he is not capable of. So he realizes that he has weaknesses, that he is powerless in some respect. And to reflect on that is the beginning of this interfaith encounter, and I would say of many successful interfaith encounters. The second part is that he is reaching out, so that interfaith encounters don't just happen on the way. It is important to really actively reach out. The third point is to demonstrate respect, to proactively send signals of respect. The centurion said, Lord, or the centurion also addressed the traditions, the Jewish traditions back then by saying, I know that I'm not worthy of you coming to my house, so proactively sending signals of respect. I think this is very important when it comes to interfaith encounters. And the fourth point is that he focuses on the competences of Jesus. He, the non-Jew, is addressing the Jew by focusing on the competences of the Jew named Jesus. So when it comes to this interfaith encounter, it is not an encounter that focuses on cliches or on prejudices, but it focuses on competences. And the fifth point is that the centurion acknowledges the togetherness, the connection that there is between what Jesus can do and the situation of the servant of the centurion. And then there is the aspect of testimony. So Jesus, who experienced the faith of the non-Jew, the centurion, he is testifying to his Jewish fellows that there is faith in the person who has another faith. And the story ends with a perspective of community. It is there are some sentences that I didn't include in the passage, but this passage also talks about people from different backgrounds joining at one table, sitting together around one table. So the story ends by sharing a perspective of community. The encounter ends with a perspective of community. Next slide, please. So, one of the very first experiences that I made during my studies when it came to interfaith encounters was an encounter in Berlin. There was a group of youngsters from a parish in Saxony who visited Berlin to have encounters with people of different faith. And on Saturday evening, I didn't know about that, but on Saturday evening, I got a call that unfortunately a person or a group of people they wanted to meet, unfortunately they can't make it. So they are now searching for an alternative. And they said, well, you know, we didn't have Islam on our list yet. And I was actually quite surprised about that when a group of youngsters from a parish in Saxony comes to Berlin, that they would not have Islam or a Muslim community on their list. But it happened. So they said, can you organize us any encounter with a Muslim parish here in Berlin? Because we don't know who to ask. And so I made some phone calls, and the next day we could very spontaneously go to the Şehitlik Mosque, which is a very famous mosque in Berlin. And we had this encounter, and I could not prepare this encounter because I actually thought that they would have, that they already prepared those interreligious encounters before they came to Berlin. But it turned out that all the questions that they asked were questions related to prejudices, to anti-Muslim racist prejudices and images. So they asked those questions, and after that, after they had asked all the questions, the person that we met said something that touched my heart and that I will not forget. He said, "You have not asked why I am a Muslim. You have not asked what I like about my religion. You have not asked what our parish's community life looks like, how we care for each other, how we help each other, how we help others. Why can't you imagine to find something good among us? What image of us do you have?" And especially this last question stayed with me. What image of us do you have? I think this is very fundamental to understand, that the questions that we ask reveal something about the image that we have from the person we talk to. When we ask only questions related to prejudices, this tells something about the image that we have of the other person. As people of faith, we should reflect on the image of man, of human, in the story of Genesis. And the image of man, of human, in the story of creation in Genesis is a story that is not talking about the other person as a bad person, but a person who has competences, who has things inside that are given by God. So it is a competence-focused story. So when it comes to interfaith encounters, I think it is very important to always reflect on the image that we have of the person we are talking to, and really reflect on this image on the base of faith, and to address the other person as a person with competences given by God. Next slide, please. Our questions reveal something about the image that we have of the person we talk to, the image of humankind, the idea of humankind. This became very important to me in Munich, in Lübeck, and in Dresden. I want to show you, to share 3 examples with you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we had an encounter with a representative of the Forum Dialogue. This is an organization that tries to facilitate encounters between Muslims and Christians. And before we had this encounter, I asked the youngsters in my parish to just write down some questions that they would have to this Muslim representative of this organization. And after they had written down those questions, I asked them, please make a cross at those questions that address his competences. And it turned out that there were not that many questions. And I said, please make a circle around those questions that are addressing prejudices. And many of those questions were actually questions related to prejudices. So what we did before we went into this interfaith encounter is to critically self-reflect ourselves why we are asking the questions that we ask, and why we have the image of the other person that we had. So we talked about the images of Islam that are circling around in media, that are circling in the narratives that surround us. So it all started with a self-critical reflection of ourselves. And after that, we tried to develop questions that would focus on his competences, that would address him in his competences, and address him as a person who loves his faith. So we ask questions like, do you have a favorite prayer? And if so, which one is it and why? Or how did your faith help you in life? How was school for you? What is empowering you? So I would say like positive questions. And in the end of this encounter, the Muslim representative of this organization said that he was actually quite surprised about this question and was very happy about this encounter, and said that he would love to have more encounters like these. I put another picture there, Changemaker Lübeck. This is a podcast that we created when I worked as a pastor in training in the city of Lübeck. And in this podcast, we met with people who wanted to make a difference in the city of Lübeck. And one of the people that I decided to have a podcast with was an activist in the Muslim parish in Lübeck, who worked in the field of youth in that parish. And he talked about the youth work of this parish and how they tried to bring people together. And so we had this podcast, we shared his answers, and in the end, we had the idea to get together our youth, the Protestant youth, and the Muslim youth, to together develop an idea for a present for the Jewish community in Lübeck, who back then reopened the synagogue. So at the end of this talk that we had for the podcast, there was a perspective of community. I think this is very important when it comes to interfaith encounters, not to only say, all right, now we had this encounter, that's it, but to really develop a perspective of how can we move on from here? What could be the next step? So the idea of that was to say, all right, we gather as Christians and Muslims, as the youth of our parishes, to do something, a surprise for the Jewish parish. And I think it is very important, something that you already realize maybe, is that especially the youth is a field where I made experiences in interfaith encounters. And it is also the youth that is bringing up this topic a lot. And when they are bringing up this topic, they bring it up because because they are worried about peace on earth. I'm very surprised that when I ask young people, what is the topic that you want to talk about here when we gather? The topic that they always name first is the topic of peace. And the second thing that they then say is, we want to talk about war, between conflicts, between religions, and we want to talk about what we can do to ensure peace among people of different faith. Another picture that I posted here is the mosque in Penzberg, close to Munich, where we went to with the elderly people of our parish. And the reason why we went there was not or the intention behind this encounter was not faith, was not peace, but was beauty. We had some people in our parish, older people, who were very interested in art, and they were very interested into Muslim art. As you maybe know, we as Reformed, we don't have images or paintings in our churches, so there is a correlation to Muslim architecture and to Muslim art. And they said, so we want to know more about what art actually means then from a Muslim perspective. So that was the starting point of that interfaith encounter. Next slide, please. I think it is very important to ask the question, what or who catalyzes interfaith experiences? And as I already said, with us, it's all especially young people, but it's not only young people because they are looking for peace, but also because they are looking for interaction and fun. The first picture shows some biscuits that we made together with the Jewish community in Munich. In Germany, we have this mitzvah day in the Jewish parishes. It's a day where they do actions together that focus on, that try to have a positive effect on the community. And the rabbi reached out to me and asked if we want to do something together. So in the end, the Jewish youth and the youth of our parish, they decided to do biscuits together and then share those biscuits with elderly people. And something that automatically happened were, of course, talks about faith. And some of our youth, for example, were quite surprised that Jews do not only speak Hebrew. And those are things that are best learned when you actively have an encounter and you just have the space to ask the questions you want to ask. But it's not only young people who catalyze the interfaith experience, it's also, especially here in Dresden, the city, because here in city, in Dresden, we have this Pegida movement, an anti-Muslim racist movement, and so the city tries to organize those meetings between faith communities to empower dialogue. And every year there is the so-called Festival of Peace of the Children of Abraham, where they get people together to talk about a topic that that is of importance nowadays. And last time it was environmental protection, environment. And I think that is very crucial when it comes to talking about interfaith experiences and interfaith in our parishes. To talk about it not only when it comes directly to interfaith dialogue. What I mean by this is to talk about interfaith perspective when it comes to environment, when it comes to art, when it comes to how we care for each other. So to bring in different perspectives from different faith and religions when it's not about interfaith dialogue per se. Next slide, please. So what or who smooths the path to interfaith experiences? As I already said, I think it is very important to address interfaith in sermons, in different circles of the parish, when it comes to very different topics. For example, now in our parish we talk about how we can ensure that elderly people are cared for, and so to wonder how do Jewish or Muslim or Hindu communities deal with this. So to bring in the different perspectives when it's not about interfaith directly. And secondly, especially in those times of digitalization, here I took a picture of a window in the mosque in Penzberg to bring visibility of interfaith into social media, so that especially the young people who you can reach through social media, that they always see how churches and Jewish communities, Muslim communities interact, and try to have this interfaith dialogue. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I'm open for your questions.
Yep.
Okay, Fabian, thank you very much indeed for your message, for your presentation, and we are very impressed. It was like a very spiritual message for us. And meanwhile, I would like to ask you questions, maybe less provocative, but I think essentially very important for us about the initiatives in Germany between these groups. So I would like to ask you about how are you trying to communicate with religious leaders? Are you organizing some initiatives with leaders of the other religious groups, like from Muslim community and Orthodox and Christians? So essentially, I want to ask you about the interaction between the religious leaders like you, and are you trying to connect, and whether you get support from the politicians, from the government for this kind of initiatives? Can you maybe give us some feedback about this issue?
Yeah, there are two levels, and I think it's very important to see that there are those two levels. So here in Dresden, for example, I meet with the rabbi every month to just exchange what is going on in his parish, and we have this little group of Lutheran, Roman Catholic, Reformed, and pastors and the rabbi to talk about this. So to have this network, and also I regularly exchange with representatives of other faith here in Dresden and in Saxony to just have this network, what is going on in your parishes, in your communities, to have this network on the level of the leaders of faith. But at the same time, and I think that is crucial, is to address interfaith in the parish on the level of non-leaders, and to to somehow see, are there any questions coming up that could activate those interfaith networks? And so, for example, we had the proposal of the rabbi here in Dresden to talk about equality, and to talk about equality with the representative of the Muslim parish, our parish, and the Jewish parish. And so when I heard it, I tried to connect to bring this question into our parish. We already had a first meeting of a small group talking about equality, of critically self-reflecting ourselves about equality. And I will bring it into the other circles of our parish, and to then somehow connect those different levels. And yes, there are there's political support of this interfaith dialogue, but I would say it's especially up to the leaders of faith to really connect and establish bonds, maybe even friendships, and at the same time to encourage voices in the parish who raise their voice for interfaith encounters, and to then just pick up those voices and to develop perspectives where these interfaith encounters can head to. And I think it is important to not only to really make very clear that it's not only about those very big events.
Hikmet Karčić, he will speak on behalf of University of Sarajevo. Hikmet, can you hear us?
Oh. Hello, how are you?
Dobar dan, salam alaikum. Drago da se čujemo. Okay, so we can start, and let me provide a bit information about you for our guest today. So, Hikmet Karčić, as I mentioned before, representing University of Sarajevo. His research has been focused on the study relation actually between different religious groups, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish people, not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but generally in Europe. And he currently is a fellow, senior fellow at the New Line Institute of Strategy and Policy in Washington, D.C., and also he's also working at the Institute for Islamic Tradition of Bosniaks in Sarajevo. Moreover, in the past, he was a fellow at the Auschwitz Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, Keene State College Global. So actually, his main field of research, he focused actually on the relation between this. So we would like to learn more from you, Hikmet. So welcome you again.
Welcome, Dr. Karčić. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you today. So today I'll be talking about interreligious dialogue and correlations and the issue of komšiluk, or neighborhood in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Firstly, I would like to give you a short introduction on how religious life and religious activities are structured inside Bosnia and Herzegovina. So Bosnia and Herzegovina is composed of, as many of you know, Bosnian Serbs, Bosnian Croats, and Bosniaks, who are Bosnian Muslims. So this means that basically we have three ethnic groups, three major Abrahamic religions living in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The livelihood of Bosnian Serbs is related to the Serbian Orthodox Church with its position in Belgrade. The Bosnian Croats, as Catholics, are correlated to Zagreb and to the Catholic Church there, and of course to the Vatican. So their life is organized from let's say their main headquarters are outside of the country. In the case of Bosniak Muslims, it's a specific situation which is not the same like in Western Europe or in Poland, for example. And that is the case that Bosniaks are European Muslims, Slavic Muslims, who have their own Islamic community organized inside their own local communities. So the Islamic community in Bosnia is made up exclusively of Bosniaks, and it has a very church-like structure. The reason for this is that it was established by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The map you can see behind me, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which came to Bosnia in 1878 and ended in 1918 after the end of the First World War. They actually created a structure called the Islamic Community of Bosnia. And they actually copy-pasted the church-like structure and implemented it in Bosnia among Islamic religious life among Bosniaks in Bosnia. So in this way, they made a very good institution which lasts to this day, which has very good and very stable structure. And so in that sense, we don't have, for example, speaking about Muslim religious life, and this is something I think which is most important for your viewers to know. You cannot open a mosque or establish a jamaat, a congregation, without the permission and without the knowledge of the Islamic community in Bosnia. So basically, the Islamic community in Bosnia has monopole over Islamic religious life in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And there are over 1,000 mosques currently in Bosnia and Herzegovina throughout the country. According to the 2013 census, there are around 1.5 million Muslims living right now currently in Bosnia. And of course, in the case of Bosnia, the religious and ethnic identity is basically the same. So it's a very rare case where you can find a Serb being a Muslim or a Croat being a Orthodox Christian or a Muslim being a Bosniak being a Catholic and things like that. So the religious and ethnic identities are basically equalized. When we talk about interreligious dialogue, it's a bit right now very difficult, and maybe the timing is not good it's maybe not a good time to talk about it, but it's very difficult to talk about interreligious dialogue knowing the local recent history of Bosnia. And that is, the 1992-1995 war and the genocide which was occurred against Bosniak Muslims by the Serb forces. So the issue of interreligious dialogue is something which has been part of the so-called reconciliation process in the post-war period. As such, it is a topic which is something which is very oftenly used, and which unfortunately in sometimes is being misused by different political sides in order to manipulate with historical grievances and with political current establishment in order to succeed in certain political aims. But nevertheless, religion in Bosnia and interreligious dialogue plays a huge role, especially in the post-war period. And there were several international initiatives which proved to be very good. And for example, the most important one is the Interreligious Council, Međureligijsko vijeće, which was set up in 1997, and which composes of all the different major religions in Bosnia. So the members of the Serbian Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, the Islamic community, and the Jewish community. They all make up this interreligious council, which has several very good initiatives on a yearly basis, and which works together promoting tolerance, peace, democracy, and things like that. So, for example, they had one of their main projects, which is very useful, is the monitoring of attacks on religious buildings. This is important because, as you know, in attacks on religious buildings, on mosques and churches, is not as common as it is in Western Europe. However, these attacks can usually be manipulated by certain media, by politicians and so on, and by the Interreligious Council having a very productive project in monitoring this kind of attacks. It proves and gives a very good overview, a very balanced overview of events, and a very detailed record of attacks and hate speech committed against believers and against religious institutions throughout the country. So this is one of the very important projects which they have. Another important project which they have is the joint calendar of religious holidays. So they publish a one joint calendar each year, which they send out to hundreds or thousands of people throughout the country. And each of these calendars has all the different religious holidays marked on the calendar. And in this way, they promote the idea of multi-religious and multicultural Bosnia and Herzegovina. They have also several other major peace-building projects. One of them was 2 or 3 years ago, which they had a joint initiative to counter and to help actually victims of sexual violence and rape from the war. So all of these religious communities jointly made actually a publication and a project which dealt with the issue of how to deal with victims of sexual violence, how to condemn these acts which were committed during the war and things like this. So they have a very, very concrete and very good projects which are going on for several years right now. One of the main funders of these projects are usually the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also international organizations such as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. So that's one thing. Is the Interreligious Council, through its activities, also every year sends out, with the help of the Million Kolbe Foundation, they send representatives to Auschwitz, to Poland, where they go and visit the Auschwitz concentration camp and also take part there in the whole program and seminar on interreligious dialogue and on dealing with the past. So, for example, in 2018, I was one of the people who was suggested to go to Auschwitz, to participate in this local seminar where I learned more about how the Catholic Church, together with the Jewish community, takes part in commemorating the Holocaust and dealing with the burdened past. The issue of komshiluk is something which might be very specific for Bosnia itself, and that is the idea of neighborhoods. So Bosnian history, Bosnian heritage, especially in larger towns, had this idea of komshiluk, or neighborhood, in which your neighbor is basically much more important than your brother. This is one of the elements of Islamic teaching as well, in which for a Muslim, a neighbor is much more important to him than his family member. So in the case of Sarajevo, for example, and that is the most oftenly spoken about topic, Sarajevo is a town which is a city in which you have 4 different major religious buildings and centers located in the very close proximity of the town. So if you come to the old town in Sarajevo, in Baščaršija, in the Grand Bazaar, you can see the Serbian Orthodox Church, you can see the Catholic Cathedral, you can see the Gazi Husrev Bey Mosque, and you can see the Sephardic Synagogue very close next to each other. And basically that's how Sarajevo functioned 100 years ago. So before the First World War, we had all of these different communities basically living in living together and living in neighborhoods, and then later on very working in the city in their everyday lives. but living in their neighborhoods together with each other. And this is something which I think is a very important segment to talk about. Of course, this segment of komşuluk has mainly been, it still exists, but to a lower extent, unfortunately, due to the Second World War, to the First World War, Second World War, and now with the recent 1992 war. So, for example, the Jewish community in Bosnia has been totally destroyed and exterminated in a large extent during the Holocaust due to the Ustasha regime, the Croatian puppet regime atrocities, in which a majority of the Jews were deported and exterminated in Jasenovac and in other Nazi camps throughout Europe. So, for example, the Jewish community right now is numbering a small number, and the local communities here in Sarajevo, for example, every year commemorate together with the Jewish community the 27th of January, which was yesterday, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. They commemorated together with the Jewish community, and several years ago we commemorated in Sarajevo the Sarajevo Purim, in which it was 200 years since the citizens of Sarajevo, Muslim citizens of Sarajevo, rebelled against the Ottoman governor at the time, because he had arrested and imprisoned several very wealthy and important Jewish citizens of Sarajevo 200 years ago, and the Muslims of Sarajevo rebelled at that time against him and forced him basically to let these Jewish elites free. And so this Sarajevo Purim is commemorated almost every year, but last year, 2 years ago, in 2019, we commemorated 200 years since the Sarajevo Purim, and this was done in relation to the Jewish community, in cooperation with the Jewish community in Sarajevo. So there are very important projects which are still going on in Bosnia, and unfortunately, as I said, the livelihood of religious communities in Bosnia is not an issue. The issue is always how politics, and usually neighboring politics or regional politics or global politics, affects the lives of these ordinary people who really don't have any sort of problems with each other and who live together one with another. But usually it's always these higher powers which affect the everyday lives of these people. So all in all, when we talk about interreligious dialogue in Bosnia, I always say that taking everything into consideration, all the wars that we had, all the violence that we had, we still have a very good situation right now in Bosnia in relation to interreligious dialogue. When you compare it to some other cases throughout the world, and we can say that we are very proud of our interreligious and multicultural Sarajevo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that is something which very oftenly is a barrier to some other ideas and to some other ideologies and to some other new orders which are appearing, unfortunately, not only in Europe but also globally throughout the world.
Dear Hikmet, thank you very much indeed for your, very interesting presentation. And I think actually it was a very positive message which you sent to us regarding the communication between these different groups. However, I would like to ask you, it will be pretty current questions about the current position of Bosnia and Herzegovina, because it seems like Bosnia and Herzegovina is like on the crossroad, and the Republika Srpska, quite recently, some of the leaders of this republic announced that they want to separate from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it seems like we are watching what's going on in this region, and the question mark appear: what will happen next? Whether Bosnia and Herzegovina will survive or just they will split from you, and they will create their own state. And additionally, the second question, which is also very important, it seems like, because you talk about the idea of komşuluk, the neighborhood, which was very especially famous in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so where the Christians with Muslim live together. And I just wonder whether we can still find in Bosnia and Herzegovina some of the places where the Muslim and Christians live together, or just opposite, we have this ongoing process with division between Muslims. So like in Mostar, the Serbs are living on the one side, like they create their own ghettos, and also the Muslim on the other side, and Croats also. So do we have some initiative to sum up, like to of the reconciliation and rebuild the idea of komşuluk in Bosnia nowadays, and just whether it is possible to implement this this kind of great idea of komşuluk in these days? So, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off with the first part of your question. Again, the Bosnian Serb Republic and Milorad Dodik, the Bosnian Serb president, he wouldn't be able to have this sort of ideas of secessionism without having help from Russia, from Orban, from Vučić, and the others. So again, this is something very regional. When you talk to ordinary Serbs and Croats in Bosnia, they honestly, and even Bosniaks, they honestly don't care. I mean, about politics. They care about a good livelihood. They care about whether they're going to have, the price of oil, or the prices of gas during winter and things like that. So it's usually this regional politics. And again, Dodik is using the crisis and the war in Ukraine and so on in order to get some of his own aims and goals, and also with the help of Vučić trying to destabilize the region again. But one of the, I think, most important things we need to know is that destabilizing Bosnia will destabilize the region, because whatever happens in Bosnia very quickly spills over to Montenegro, to Sanjak, to Kosovo, to Macedonia, and so on. And that is an issue that we all need to very clearly have in mind. And that is why I think the whole idea of a multi-ethnic Bosnia is an issue for Dodik and for Vučić and for Putin and the others. But I'm pretty sure that we will somehow be able to survive even this time again, and hopefully keep Bosnia, however difficult it might seem, in the same position as it has been in the last several hundred years. Regarding initiatives of reconciliation, I think it is still possible in these larger towns such as Banja Luka, Tuzla, Mostar, Zenica, to recreate the issue of komşuluk again. I'm pretty sure it's possible, and in some cases it has re-established itself in a very organic way. Like when you mentioned Mostar, I was recently in Mostar, and I went to this new cafe on the border between East and West Mostar. And this was actually one of the rare cafes where young people of Mostar, from both sides, both Croats and Bosniaks, come together and hang out. And you could see that this new generation of kids who were born in 2005, 2006, who don't remember the war and who are not interested in politics, that they have this already very good correlations and so on. And thankfully, the social media has also led to this rediscoverance of friendships and relationships and so on. So I'm pretty sure that all of these things can rebuild themselves organically if you have a very positive economical and political situation. So you don't have to invest money into building Komshiluk. Komshiluk itself comes about, it re-establishes itself in such opportunities. So I'm pretty sure that it's very possible to re-establish the idea of Komshiluk in these larger towns. Villages and rural areas are a bit difficult because they've always been divided. So throughout history, you always had Serb, Croat, Bosniak villages and so on, and you didn't have these mixed villages in most of these cases. That was very rare. But towns were always mixed, and that is why I think it's still very possible to have this idea. And we already have small examples of them, popping up in different areas throughout the country.
Thank you very much, Hikmet, for your presentation. And actually, we fully agree with you, and we are keeping our fingers crossed for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And actually, we also believe that idea of Komshiluk will still survive. And the most interesting is that Komshiluk exists also in some different part of Europe. Quite recently, I saw this in Malta, where the Serbs, Croats, and the Muslim, for example, in Malta, are drinking together coffee. They are hang out together, and they prefer to spend time in this group because they are from Balkans. They have the same culture. So actually, I was very surprised about this. So in some places, actually, we can find this process of reconciliation and the dialogue in action. So thank you again for your interesting presentation. And now we are going to have Adrian.
Yeah. Thank you, Karol. Thank you to our guests for joining the conference as a part of the Prosperities project. Thank you for presenting your research, viewpoints, and experience in this part. All the speeches given today show diversity, which understanding and mutual respect for each other is the way to counter racism, radicalization, and finally acts of aggression such as terrorism. Thank you for all your speech. We are rich in knowledge and raise awareness not only for the threats, but of the how to counter them and build the bridge. Now we are starting the comments panel and short break.
Yeah, so we are going to have a short break. Okay, welcome again after a short break, and now I think it's good time to start to sum up our conference, and I would like to introduce you with our two important speakers, member of this project research, and the first speaker will be Pablo Trojley. Also, we will have the guest from Finland, Timo Hellenberg. Welcome you, and good to see with us. So
good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are more happy to see you with us, and so actually we can start to sum up our conference, and this is what we learned so far thanks to our speakers. I think all of us benefit from these lectures, and now I think it's good time to provide the feedback about the outcome of our conference. So the floor is yours. Timo, you can start if you have some feedback regarding our conference. So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I have been fascinated about the discussion today, and good afternoon from Helsinki. Snowy, cold weather here. I was fascinated about the whole day, and I would like to congratulate all the organizers of setting up this very important conference today. I was particularly inspired by Dr. Elizabeth Drayson and also Professor Agata Nalborczyk, who both described the wider historical context and the need for the interfaith dialogue. This has been very impressive message for all of us today. Many aspects were mentioned, and they remind me about the ongoing processes in our neighborhood today. And I think that Professor Adrian Siadkowski very nicely referred to the ongoing processes at the Baltic Sea region and Eastern Europe, which we are witnessing today. Somehow representing the Nordic-Baltic region, I think I should maybe highlight a little bit our experiences here in the northeast corner of Europe. When it comes to the religious-based dialogue, it's good to remind that actually this April, it becomes 780 years memorable day from the very important landmark issue related to the need for the religious-based dialogue, the Battle of Ice, battle at the Peipsi Lake between the Orthodox and Protestant forces. This battle was very important landmark issue, collision by the two religious-driven forces, East and West. And it's still affecting us today in our geopolitical environment at the Baltic Sea. More closely, of course, we have many issues which we could list over here, where we can draw years ago between East and West Orthodox and Protestant forces, the Deutsche Ordnung and the Grand Duchy of Moscow at the Syriza River, August 1501. But let's come back to the modern times. I'm very grateful for this short intervention possibility. I think that the world has changed dramatically when it comes to the faith and religious-based conflicts. After 9/11, we have seen a lot of escalation taking place, not only in Middle East, but also here in Europe. Migration crisis in Europe is the fact today. And it has become clear that the central problem is also our lack of understanding, the difficulty to understand the systemic behavior, appearance, inner workings of the religious faith-based groups in many countries. And for that reference today is particularly valuable. One of the challenges remaining also is related to our national conflict management policies today. We should somehow try to find a balance of understanding between the religious groups, religious rules, and faith-related issues in our countries. For instance, here in Finland, we are living in the new environment. First time ever in the Finnish history, we have more Muslim population than Orthodox history. So that's the need for the new understanding and the new dialogue between the faith-related issues. Then, of course, we have an issue of radicalization and extremists. This is just a fact, and we need to understand more the real extremists, the false extremists, such as the religious fundamentalists who oppose the secular rules, those who claim superiority against the others, and also the missionary claim the superiority of their religious views in both sermons and politics. My personal particular concern is the psychological impact of the religious-based attacks. This is one of the things we haven't studied enough, and how these religious-based attacks can create a panic modeling, panic evacuation of contaminated religious areas. And this is something we will study also in this Prosperous project. Just to summarize, I would like to say that we need to have more emphasis on generic challenges in the interfaith dialogue. And we need to look at the new concept of sovereign citizens, religious fundamentalists and extremists. I would like to congratulate once again our discussion today, and I look forward to further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Timo, for your interesting feedback. And maybe, Pavel, if you don't mind, you can also provide some information.
Surely.
Yeah.
Surely, yes. Firstly, I'm very grateful for all the speakers that presented very, very interesting, point of view. For me, coming from Slovakia, where the Christian religion is about the 80% of the population, there is not much, or it was not from my side, to be involved in interreligious dialogue. And it was very interesting, what has been said, by all of you. So I have taken a lot of comments, what we can really take as the messages for the awareness-raising campaign, especially from you, I would say in military term, who have the dirty boots, who are on the ground, and doing the job, doing the awareness-raising campaign and interreligious dialogue. The techniques that you are using are working, are functional, and it is actually the pity, when we can hear also from you that the people that usually actually misuse the situation and misuse the facts taking from the past, for their benefits, for the political reasons. So it's actually the thing how the young generation is actually also spoiled in this way of thinking. So congratulations to all of you. I'm really grateful to Elizabeth, to Ruth, Fabian, Agata, and also Hikmet. Lots of lessons, not only for us, for the advantage and for the benefit of the project, but for all listeners. So thank you very much. Your points, your thoughts are going to be shared. And also, I hope that it will be the same, for you, that you know about our project, about our goals, and that's very good synergy between. Thank you very much.
Thank you, both of you, for this feedback. And actually, I can confirm that we learned so far a lot from these lectures. As a matter of the fact, we can discuss about this issue more and more. because it's so interesting. I think the positive message which we learned so far from this conference, that the dialogue exists. This is what I learned so far. The dialogue exists between the regular people, but since the politicians try to interfere, our life is start to get worse. So even this, I still believe that this what we are doing also with consortium will bring some benefits, and hope everything will be fine. So thank you again for this for your feedback, and we will soon start to have a small summary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay. So on behalf of our university, WSB in Dąbrowa Górnicza, we are more than happy, and thank you very much indeed for your presentation, and our guests as well for the lectures. So I would like to say again thank you for this, for all of the members of this project to participate and to follow our presentation. Adrian?
Yes, thank you to our guests today for presenting important issues, for understanding each other. Ignorance builds stereotypes. Raising awareness through education, dialogue, and understanding is the way to understand threats, real and objective threats, and an adequate response to security threats. And these threats are present in the religious place of worship of all religions. Better to know. With this motto, I thank you for your thank you for your participation in the conference. Once again, thank you, our guests, representatives of consortium, and everyone involved in the Prosperous project. This conference is a part of the international project Prosperous, protection system of large gathering of people in religious sites under the European Union Internal Security Fund policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and hope to see you again.